Just kidding. We all get a little grumpy in the house. You can't go outside. The snow it's in that weird time where sometimes the snow just doesn't stick and it's just cold. And you're just done with snow and winter. I'm pretty sure by the time I'm a retired man, we will live in Florida. And maybe it's the best thing for our marriage. But anyway, around February, the way that we've dealt with this for the last probably, I don't know, since we've had kids almost, is we schedule about 2 days to go to some place with an indoor water park. And there's one in the Poconos called Great Wolf Lodge. We used to go to one in Erie called Splash Lagoon. And for 2 glorious days, we pretend it's summer, all right? And we are inside in a heated environment with swimming pools, and we can see the snow falling outside, but we are warm inside. And then we pack up and we go outside, and our hair freezes on the way to the car because it's still so cold out. But we've all been in those places where whatever season we're in, we're just sick of it. It could be a literal season, like many of us feel around February and March, or even in April sometimes in Pennsylvania. I saw snow on April 15th this year. That was the latest I have seen in a while. But in Pennsylvania is a wonderful place if you want to experience seasons. We get them all in full force. I used to live for a little while in Texas. In Texas, they mark their seasons just by levels of hotness. There's really not a whole lot of ecological change that happens in the southern states during those times. And so, at least in Pennsylvania, we get to enjoy fall leaves for a week, and then winter for 6 months, and then we get to enjoy 3 weeks of spring and then summer. And it's so weird that in the middle of summer, when it's 100 degrees and you're sweltering, you can't even remember what winter was like, right? You're just sitting in front of your air conditioner, and that's the way seasons go. Sarah and I have found that what is a helpful way to just view parenting is in terms of seasons. About the time that your kids are stuck in some strange behavioral pattern you can't figure out, you just kind of remind yourself, it's a season. This is not forever. They will grow out of this. It will change. And God moves in seasons in our lives in a number of ways. He moves in seasons in families and individuals. He moves in seasons for churches as well. And oftentimes, it seems like, from my experience, that whatever season that you're in, unless it's summer, metaphorically or literally, we often wish it was a different season. If you're a young parent, you've experienced this, that you go to the grocery store, you've had a hard day, your kids have been screaming, and you are frazzled, and then like a grandmotherly figure will come up to you in the store, pinch your kids on the cheek and say, "Oh, just cherish these moments." And you're thinking, "I don't know. Would you like to take them home with you? Because I'm not really cherishing this right now." And yet, obviously, there's something that happens later in our lives that causes us to reflect on these earlier seasons from a position of we see the beauty in that. Even though in the middle of them, we often experience, we're disgruntled, we're exhausted, we're anxious. There are parts to seasons that offer gifts as well. In fact, Pete Scazzero, who I owe a great deal of debt to as I prepared for this, he wrote a book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, and he says that true spiritual growth cannot happen without seasons. And a lot of being a Christian is paying attention to what's going on around us. And so I chose this topic of seasons in particular for today, because today we're transitioning. We're transitioning graduates out. We're transitioning all of our college students into the summer. We're transitioning by not having a third service for the summer. We'll just go back to 2. And so there's a lot of transition that happens around this time of year in our church and in our lives. There's a fascinating verse in the book of 1 Chronicles. If you've ever read 1 Chronicles, there's a lot of names and dates and lineages. But there's this verse in 1 Chronicles, chapter 12, verse 32, that says this. And the author is talking about all the tribes, and it says in 1 Chronicles 12:32, from the tribe of Issachar, there were 200 leaders of the tribe with their relatives. Now listen to this. All of these men understood the signs of the times and knew the best course for Israel to take. So it seems as though in Israel's history, there were this one tribe, the tribe of Issachar, in their family, and all these thousands of Israelites, or millions. And this family in particular had this legacy in that they were able to pay attention. They looked and observed what was happening around Israel at this time. And as a result of their observance of what was taking place, they were able to offer wisdom and guidance to the nation. Some people we know live in the past. We just relive great moments from our past. And other people are always thinking about the future, which can be good. But there is something to be gained from being aware of what God is doing now, right now, in this moment in our lives. And this family, this Issachar family, had the legacy of paying attention to what was happening. And they could lead Israel well. Timing in listening to God and discerning when to act is everything. And if we don't understand the idea that God moves us in seasons of our lives, we will get discouraged when things get hard, when things shift around us. We will be reluctant to release our children from childhood into the next season of being teens or into adults. We will jump from job to job in our working environment too quickly because things get uncomfortable, and we won't understand that there are seasons in all ways. We won't, as a church, we will be reluctant to give responsibility to new leaders if we don't understand that there are seasons in the church. So my main text today is found in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 to 11. Ecclesiastes 3, 1 to 11. Do we have those verses on the screen back there, Isaac? Ecclesiastes 3. And Isaac is like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain today. Run the projector. All right. Next slide, Isaac. All right. This is what Solomon writes. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek, and a time to lose. A time to keep, and a time to cast away. A time to tear, and a time to sow. A time to keep silence, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time for war, a time for peace. What gain has the worker from all of his toil? I have seen the busyness that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. Verse 11, he has made everything beautiful in its time. We'll just stop there. He has made everything beautiful in its time. The author is saying that there is something to every season of our lives that is redemptive and beautiful. Now, I will be honest that it is easy to see the beauty in some of these seasons, in some of these times, right? In the birth, and in the healing, and in the dancing, and in the embracing. It's obvious to me. It's easy to enjoy those seasons and to see that God has made those seasons beautiful. It is far harder for me to see the beauty that comes from the mourning and the losing, the casting away, the seasons of silence when it feels like God's not talking to you. And what the author here says, it's not necessarily that we should define these seasons as the good ones or the bad ones, and that God only is in the good seasons and we just got to stick our head down and get through the bad ones. But rather, what this text is telling us is that God comes to us. He teaches us unique things about ourselves in each of these seasons. And depending on what season I am in, I either love or hate this passage. If I'm in a season of fruitfulness and newness and exciting things, then I don't like these verses because they tell me that this season will eventually move on and there will be a season of loss. But if I'm in the season of loss, I cling to these verses and I say, I just can't wait. I know God has a plan and I can't wait for summer to come in our lives. And so some of us, there's a very grown-up way to look at our lives and what God's doing. Some of us have been Christians for many years, and it's still hard to wrap our minds around the idea that we cannot manufacture our own seasons. Like, No matter what I do, I can't make winter last any longer or shorter in Pennsylvania. I can go to Great Wolf Lodge and pretend that it's not winter, but eventually I've got to go home, right? Eventually I have to live through the season that God has me in. In case you think I'm crazy, I think we can look at Jesus' life as an example here. So Jesus, we know he's born. We get a little glimpse of his life when he's 12 years old in the temple. But other than that, the Bible has nothing in it regarding Jesus' life until he's 30. Jesus goes for this season of dormancy, where God is he is God, but he's fully man, and he's growing and understanding his calling. And he just doesn't do a whole lot for 30 years. You might think, listen, God came to earth. That's 30 wasted years. Imagine all that he could be doing, healing and raising the dead and all the things that he does for 3 years. He had 30 years to do all that, and yet that's not the season he was in. He goes into a season in the wilderness for 40 days where he's tempted. And then after that season of winter, he just emerges in the Gospels. And for 3 years has a season of great fruitfulness. And he preaches and teaches and eventually goes through a season of suffering as he dies for the sins of the world, and then resurrection. And Jesus had to live through each of those seasons to be the kind of God that we needed him to be. And so what I hope we can do today is to evaluate, as we're walking through these seasons, ask yourself, all right, so what season does God have me in right now? And what's he trying to say to me in this season? And are you able to receive the season that God has you in well? Because each season has a unique gift to it, and if we will receive that gift. And I'm not saying that God makes painful things happen. All right, sin is in the world and sin causes pain, but God is a redemptive God. And so even though we go through seasons of loss and death, God, in his beautiful ability to redeem things, can bring new life out of those places. So I think I'm going to start with fall. Fall is one of my favorite seasons in nature. I got married in the fall, outside. It's just a great time. In the fall, there's a brief season of beauty. We get to enjoy cooler nights. The days are shorter. We have bonfires and campouts. And even though we know that winter is imminent, it doesn't detract from the beauty of fall. Fall is this season of transition, right? Where the trees lose their leaves and they prepare for what's coming. The writer of Ecclesiastes says, there is a time to seek and there is a time to lose. One of the great and challenging things of following Jesus is learning when to let go. All right? We often, as humans, hold on to things far longer than we should. You see this in churches that start programs that had a season of great fruitfulness in them, and God did great things in that ministry, that program. But everything has a season, and eventually it stops being effective, and it's time to reimagine what we should do next. But churches often, we close our fists around the past, and we believe that because it worked well then, we got to keep doing it forever. And so we reject change because there's always a little bit of loss in that. One of the ways we do discipleship at the Commonplace is with triads, 3 to 5 Christians who come together and we study God's Word and we read that. Even those, we should give ourselves permissions to put an end date on our small groups. To say, we're going to pick a date and we're going to evaluate at that time if this was a great season for us, and maybe it's time to multiply and start new groups. Or what we have to learn the art of letting go. I know that I have stayed on committees and on boards longer than I should have because I was afraid to let the season end. And yet it's only in releasing things that God can bring new life. It is impossible to constantly start new things without letting go of some things. You will just be burned out in the end. And it's okay to let go. It's okay to let go. If you need to have a time of prayerful examination, is this the thing God wants me to do? Or has my time with this kind of come to an end? And then to release that thing that you've done. You know, it was a year ago, on this very celebration Sunday, that Sam preached his last sermon to us, our college minister. And I'll be honest, I anticipated immediately finding a replacement. I mean, who wouldn't want to come to the Commonplace Church, right? We're a lot of fun, right? And yet God has moved us from a season of loss there to a season of winter and waiting. And really not a whole lot of clarity around that particular thing as well. We've seen other people move. We've lost key leaders in our church, the Gorhams, and we've lost the Lombards. And in all of these seasons, it's hard to let go. And yet there's also a unique aspect of letting go where new things can form as well. And as we age, there are things that our bodies can't do that we once did. We are just not as strong as we once were. And so it's okay to let go. Is there anything that you're holding on to right now that God is whispering in your heart? It's okay. I can't do a new thing until you let go of the old thing. Maybe God has already begun to take some things from you, and it hurts, and you're a little bitter about the loss. And the thing that God is asking you to do is to confess the bitterness and ask God to help you see the gift in the loss as well. Well, the next season after fall moves us into winter. Winter is a tough season. In winter, in nature, few animals are stirring. They go into hibernation. The trees are bare. Winter is a season in which we give ourselves permission to really not do a whole lot. We just have to wait and listen well. In some ways, winters, in a spiritual sense, are a forced rest. Sometimes, whether we like fall or not, things have been taken from us. It could be relationships, it could be jobs, it could for you graduates. Whether you wanted to graduate or not, I'm pretty sure you all did. It's over. Like your time is up. At the end of this week, you'll get your graduation certificate, and you are out the door. And sometimes the new thing, we don't go from fall to spring immediately. That God moves us into a season, oftentimes, of waiting upon Him. I would say in my own life, the last year or two have been a season of waiting and listening. Part of that was the church. You released me to go on a sabbatical a year ago, just about this time. I went into that, I'll be honest, expecting to get great visions of what was next, and God didn't do that for me. Instead, He began to help me see myself more clearly. Because really, I went to counseling, and I began to listen to God's voice in a way that I had not heard it before. And that's really the gift of winter. In nature, you can see things so clearly in winter. The foliage is down, it's dark and barren, but the landscape is incredibly clear, right? You see life more clearly in winter. You see yourself more clearly. You might not like what you see, but you can see it. The problem is, many of us hate winter so badly that we don't let it do its good work. We are grumpy to God. We complain to God the whole time that we're in winter. We beg Him for spring. But if you read the Psalms, the psalmists often say this phrase, "How long, O Lord? How long? I am tired of this. Move me into something new." And if we're not healthy in our winter seasons, if we don't receive what God's doing in those times, those are prime opportunities for us to develop bad habits. Because what we do is we try to numb the pain. We develop eating disorders, we get addicted to pornography, we find substance abuse, we just try to numb whatever it is that's not taking place in our lives. And there's no reason, in real life, right, we all come out of winter a little bit fatter, right? We just ate our way through it. We all come out of winter sitting down with Netflix and saying, I can't find anything to watch. Or whatever your TV choice is. We just kind of, oftentimes, we just consume our way through winter, rather than pausing and reflecting on what God wants to teach us in these seasons. And here's the other thing. It seems as though the longer the season, the deeper the work God is doing in our lives. By the end of a winter season, you're usually willing to do things that you previously wouldn't have said yes to. If, fall comes and he takes something from you, and you immediately want to fill it up with some idea of your own, but God moves us into a season of winter where we begin to go and be introspective and grow closer to God, and He does stuff in our souls that would not have happened and just aren't capable of happening in seasons of fruitfulness. So don't let commonplace, let's not let boredom rush the process. I will be honest, I am a spring junkie. I love new beginnings. It is no wonder that I have started a coffee shop and a church and a restaurant and bought a ridiculously big building and done all these things, not because I like food or I like buildings. I do like food, but because I just like new things. And yet God has moved me into a season of listening and being quiet and waiting. There's a story in the Bible of a man named Abraham. In the Old Testament, God gives Abraham a promise. And he says to Abraham, I'm going to make you the father of many nations. Someday, because of you, all of the nations of the earth will be blessed. The Messiah is going to come from you, Abraham. Now, the tricky part of this promise for Abraham is that he doesn't have any kids. And he's an old man. And he's been in his winter season for a long time. And he is excited about the promise, and yet then years go by. I think it's 20 years. I'll have to check that later. But a long time, and still no children. Still nothing happens. And so Abraham and his wife Sarah begin to question the winter season, and they begin to manufacture an answer. And so Sarah says, Abraham, you know what, maybe the thing that we should do is you should sleep with my servant Hagar and have a child to her. Maybe that's really how God wants to accomplish his will for our lives. And so Abraham does that, and Ishmael is born, and it causes great division within his family. Anytime we try to manufacture spring, anytime we begin to manufacture spring, it births something fake and something that's doesn't have the blessing of God on it. I could spiritually live in Great Wolf Lodge and pretend it's spring, but eventually I have to get home. And I might miss the gift of winter if I never take time to listen and wait. Now, I also want to say that to guard against getting stuck in winter, all right? Especially when it comes to grief. It's possible to go through a season of loss. Someone that you love has died. And to not process through the grief in a healthy way, and to just get stuck in winter, to just kind of figure out that this is going to be life forever now. There is no spring for you. And that's not God's plan either. Don't get stuck in a winter. In the Old Testament, there's a guy named Saul. God anoints Saul to be king. And eventually, through a series of poor leadership decisions, God goes to King Saul and he says, Saul, I'm going to remove you from kingship, and I'm going to replace you with someone else. Saul does not receive that message well and continues to push his own agenda. He tries to he becomes paranoid and murderous. He's verbally abusive to his own son, Jonathan, in this season. And so there's a part of winter that we have to also allow it to do its good work, or we will miss the gift of it. I have observed that there is something that happens in our winter seasons that brings us close to God, if we're able to. And I see this in two ways. As your pastor, this has come to me in a couple of ways. One is, many of you go through crisis in your life. And so you look to some spiritual leader for help, and I'll have you, and we'll be talking in my office. And there is this season where, for the first time in a long time, you're beginning to hear from God. And you're bringing your hurts and your prayers to Him, and He's answering you, and you've grown close to Him. And then something I've observed happens, that when the winter ends and spring begins, there is a tendency to forget the good work God did in the winter and to move on. And I've observed this. People just kind of stop coming to church after the crisis is over. Rather than continuing the habits of relationship with Jesus they learned in the winter, that would make spring and summer so much more rewarding. We just kind of walk away from those things. I've also observed this whenever someone is going through a crisis and there's a lot of tension in their lives. It's almost like the atmosphere between them and God gets thinner. They're able to hear from Him a little bit better. They come up to me and they'll say after a sermon that I think went rather poorly, they'll say something like, "Oh, Pastor, that was the best sermon you ever preached." And I'm like, "Yeah, I really don't think so." It's nice of you to say that. But there's just something that happens in moments of grief that allows us to encounter God more clearly. That's a gift. Don't lose the gift of winter. Now, winter does end. Thankfully, this is not Narnia. We move into spring eventually. And I think that both spring and fall have these weird transition moments when it's not quite winter and it's not quite summer yet. And just, there's just a season of like, I know it's almost here, but it's not here yet. You can't go outside, you don't know what to wear to work because you go and it's freezing. By the time you come home, it's, 70 degrees. But eventually, sap begins to flow and buds form on the trees, and there is new beginnings. We begin to plant in preparation for harvest. For some of our college students, you are about to enter your spring. For some of you, you see the last 4 years as your winter. Like, oh, it's over finally. Now I can move on to what's next. And for us as the church, this is a bit of a fall season because we're losing you. But in the fall, there will be freshmen and new beginnings for us as well. So in the beauty of spring, it's important that we don't lose sight of the one who gave it to us. We don't lose sight of the plan that God has for us in that season. Which then moves us into the season of summer, which I think of as abundance. It's hard in the middle of summer even to remember the coldness of winter, right? And sometimes in the middle of summer, we actually reflect on our winters with a little bit of, we remember it bittersweet. Like we think, I remember back in that season when everything new, I had time on my hands, and now I'm too busy. I can't even take time for myself. And let's face it, in summertime, in times of harvest, when things are great, there's not a whole lot of time to do self-examination. Instead, it's often about managing what God is doing in our lives and handling the harvest well. When it comes to telling others about Jesus and people who make the decision to follow Christ, we have to remember that as great of a celebration as that is, those seeds were planted in someone else's fall and winter. Like very seldom does anyone turn to Christ for the first time they hear about Jesus. It takes years of faithful tilling of the soil and waiting before someone crosses that line into God's kingdom. That we celebrate today that so many of our youth met Jesus at this youth retreat. They have been going to youth group for quite a while though. And our leaders and our families have been building into the soil the potential for new life to emerge. And that's important when we think about the role of the church is to cultivate soil so that there can be seasons of harvest as well. And for those of us who are new Christians, we've all experienced this moment of we come to Christ and things are fresh and new and exciting. We listen to Christian radio all of the time and we read all of the Christian books we can read. And we're just so excited. And then something bad happens in our lives and we begin to wonder, like, what happened? It's okay. You've just hit a new season. This is the ordinary way that God grows his people, is through seasons in our lives. So, commonplace, we have to learn how to discern the seasons. I know we want spring and summer all the time. But if we try to artificially make spring when it's not the season, we will make something fake that doesn't have lasting fruit. Also, I just want to give us a word of caution. Don't identify your success by comparing your season to someone else's season. It will just foster pride and insecurity in your life. In parenting, it's easy at whatever season you're in with your kids to look at another parent and see that it sure looks like they're in a better season than you are. And you think, man, they must just be amazing parents. Maybe they can raise my kids for me, right? You know what? They had miserable seasons as well. In fact, they might be in a difficult season, but they just are putting on a good face. Or in pastoring. When I go to ministry conferences, and they parade the pastors on stage and the speakers, they don't put the burnt out, depressed pastor who thought about leaving his church that week on stage. They don't put the pastor in his winter season for us to learn from. No, they bring up the pastors that are in their summers and are having great fruitfulness. And then we all sit around, all of us pastors in our winter seasons, and feel bad about ourselves. Like, man, how can I ever achieve that? You know what? It's okay. That guy had his winter season too. So, and I think that it's safe to say that social media doesn't help this out on an individual level either. Like what we present to people is images, false images of our summers, when all of us are going through various seasons as well of grief. And so we wrestle with a lot of anxiety when we try to compare what God's doing in our lives to what he's doing in someone else's life. Or we may walk away feeling rather arrogant if we're in a season of fruitfulness and someone else is not. So we need to come open-handed to God and be willing to receive whatever he wants to bring to you in whatever season you are in, because he has made everything beautiful in its time. And I don't always understand how he does that, or the path that he takes to build those beautiful things. But I trust that he's a good God, and that he has a plan for me, and a plan for our church, and a plan for you. And if we will pay attention and receive the season well, he's going to birth things that are important and things that have value in our lives. We have to be patient, and I'll pay attention to what he's doing around us. Now, I think it would be wise for me to close today with just a simple reminder and invitation that the best season that we can ever go into is a season of new life in Christ. 2 Corinthians, I don't have this on the screen, but 2 Corinthians 5:17 says this: if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old is gone, the new is here. And maybe the thing that God's doing in your life today is saying, I want you to become part of my family. Maybe spring is just a decision away for you. Like there has been a coldness in your heart, but God is beginning to warm it. And you're feeling things in your life you've not felt before, and you hear his voice more clearly. And there's parts of you where he's convicting you of places you need to repent of and turn in faith to Christ. I would encourage you, if you've never made that decision to new life with Jesus, to do that today. Let go of self and sin. Jesus, in the big sense of the story of the Bible, took winter for us on our behalf when he suffered and died. He took the punishment that we deserve so that we can have new life. If you've never experienced new life, I want to invite you to do that today. I'm going to have the worship team come up, and the way we're going to close this out is as they sing some songs, as we together as a congregation sing, I want to give you an invitation. Here's the invitation. Maybe you just need to sit in your chair and reflect quietly and journal on what God's doing and what he's saying and think about the season you're in. Sometimes, though, we need to talk to someone. We need to pray with someone because there's a wall we've got to pray through to get to the season that God's calling us to. And that might be following Jesus for the first time and walking in new life with him. So I will be here ready to pray with anyone who wants to pray. I've got some elders who are also willing to pray with you. My wife would be willing to pray with anyone. Also, we don't often give opportunity for this because the church and the coffee shop is just a little bit tight. But if you have a sickness and you want to be prayed for healing, James says to invite the elders of the church to anoint and pray for you. And so we're happy to pray for anyone who's sick today as well that would like to experience the healing touch of Jesus. So, how about I pray for us? And I want you all to stand with me as well. I'm just going to be quiet for a second, and we'll pray together. Lord, I pray that you would bring new life to some hearts today. I pray that we wouldn't have any graduates that might walk away from the commonplace today who never knew the experience of walking in new life with Jesus. They would be surrendered hearts among the commonplace. And we would be able to celebrate new life. I pray for those who have followed you for many years and maybe are in a winter right now. And I pray that you would give them a fresh perspective today of who you are so that they can receive from you in this season all that you want them to receive. I pray for any who might be sick today who want someone to pray for them, that they would step out and pray for them. That I pray that you would do a great work in a common place this morning. I pray this all in Jesus' name.